IIT Madras Research Park, which he set up at IIT Madras in 2011. He has won the Indian National Academy of Engineering Young Engineer Award and IITM's R&D Early Career Award. He has over 200 research publications in leading journals and conferences. I now hand over the session to the distinguished speaker. And also, as mentioned earlier, there is a question slip given to all of you after the presentation is done by the distinguished speaker. We request you to write your questions and hand it over to the volunteers around. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, and thank you, MMA. Very happy to see so many people on a Saturday morning. Right? Actually, the Saturday morning has actually now become the latest precious lazy morning of the week. Right? So very glad to see so many youngsters. I should thank Vijay Kumar and Mr. Balram, who actually visited the center and said, can you give a talk? I just happened to be available this weekend. So very glad it's worked out. So what I will do today is I'll give you an overview and some representative illustrations of the kind of technologies that we have been developing in IIT Madras through this Healthcare Technology Innovation Center, which many of have become commercially successful products. Right? So that's the important thing. And as you know, Chennai is very good at keeping secrets. Right? So we don't talk about anything. And so Mohandas Pai, who I happen to know well, he keeps saying, why are you guys like this? Why are you always, I have to hear about what you're doing sitting in Bangalore and Delhi. So I said, that's Chennai for you, right? So that's what it is. So that is the first aspect. The second aspect of it is, I wanted to give you a sense of how technology is both influencing the healthcare business and perhaps probably may become a key, both an enabler as well as a disruptor and probably a saver of healthcare business. Because I don't know how many of you are in healthcare business. Actually, healthcare business itself is at a crossroads. It's very interesting. Right? The health of healthcare business in India as a business is not that good right now. In a positive sense, right? Where the cost and the price point of many of these healthcare procedures, actually one of the lowest in the world, right? And perhaps highest in quality. And that has actually caused some very interesting challenges from a business standpoint. Right? So we'll sort of ask some questions as to whether technology can be an enabler and a saver for this. So with that, let's just get started. So this is India's healthcare context, right? Which is scale, which you're all aware of, and availability of skilled human resources. Right? So fundamentally, healthcare is a human service. Right? So you have to realize that, which is what do you see in a hospital? You see people. Right? You see people, and then they help you get better through drugs and devices. And this is largely the way you can look at a healthcare market. Right? So to give a number, healthcare market in India is somewhere between around $100 to $120 billion. Right? So that's where it lies. So less than 5% of the world's country's GDP. Right? So the challenges in India with respect to healthcare is most part of the country, the availability of doctors. When I say doctors, I mean largely healthcare professionals, not just doctors alone, nurses. And as you know, in healthcare, the human value chain is actually about 60 to 70% of the healthcare cost. Yeah? So that is severely lacking. So that's, and as you know, 70% of the population has less than 30 to 20% of the doctors. That's one challenge. And as you know, most of the healthcare payments in India is out of pocket. Right? So 80, sometimes even higher, of our healthcare expenditure is from out of pocket. Insurance coverage is still very small. So that's one of the things which the government is addressing. As a result, you'll be very surprised to know this. Right? There are actually a few million people every year get into serious financial disaster. So actually disaster is actually the easiest way to address it, right? And it may appear like a large number, but it's actually a very small percentage if you look at it. So few million people get into a huge problem. Right? So if you want to innovate in healthcare, both as a process or a technology or a device, if you really want to create an impact in the system, it has to sort of check all the three parameters. First is it has to be affordable, as you know. I mean, without affordability, there is absolutely no chance of this getting into the system. The second thing is the accessibility part. So there are many, and I'll give you some examples. There are situations where the cost is actually zero. In fact, everything is underwritten, everything is covered, but still there is no impact because the geographical access or sometimes the skill access is very poor. Right? So where I either cannot reach a particular place, or even if I reach there, I don't have the necessary skills to help me. Right? So this is the second aspect. Third is, as you know, most of your management, if this doesn't have a scale, it doesn't have a business, as a result, it doesn't take off. Right? So it is in this context, in about, so I had returned from US in about late 2008, joined IIT Madras as a faculty. So in US, I was doing a lot of cutting edge medical devices, a lot of things I was doing. So I came back and we at IIT Madras decided that we want to make a significant impact in this area. And the reason is, today we import about 80 to 90% of all our medical devices. Yes? So the medical devices consumption in India is somewhere around 45 to 50,000 crores. So we can do the calculation. So it is significant, right? It is. And the domestic industry today in India in medical devices is very fragmented. Right? So you probably have not more than 5 to 6 players who are doing even 100 plus crore. So you can imagine. And a long tail, right? I mean, it's a long tail of many companies doing sub tens of crores. So that creates another challenge. So with all this, in about 2011, I didn't realize you can see this. Oops. Okay. In 2011, we started this center called Healthcare Technology Innovation Center at IIT Madras. And the challenge, and I'll tell you a little bit about the challenge before we get to the result, is healthcare is fundamentally an interdisciplinary area. If you want to do something in medtech, you need the hospitals, the doctors, the government agencies, the NGOs, the social bodies, all of these have to come together. Right? And that is why it is one of the hardest research areas to pursue. Right? So as also our institutions, our universities are structured very differently. So unlike the West, or at least most of the West, where you see universities which have all these in one piece, or sometimes accessible pieces. Right? So that's not the case in India. So we took this challenge, and what we have done today is, in IIT Madras, we have the largest health tech innovation ecosystem in the country. So there are about 30 to 40 hospitals, many of them are in the city, around the country, working together with us. And we have almost about 200 to 250 engineers, researchers, faculty, and there are about 25 startups which we have incubated in the last about 2 years or so. And as a result of all this, it has become very successful. And today it is, as I said, it's a well-kept secret that it is actually nationally a leading place in the country. So, as I was saying, it's people. Right? So essentially, you have to start with the ecosystem in healthcare. And then you need the different kinds of people, right? The hospitals, the doctors, the policy people. Right? All of these have to come together, and we have been able to deliver innovations that have gone all the way to the field. And this is the dashboard, right, which I personally monitor, because at the end of the day, what happens is the impact in the field is what matters. So we will briefly go through all of this in the next about 10 minutes or so. I thought I'll leave you with a snapshot of it, right? So what you see there is the country's first, perhaps even in a global sense, one of the few truly mobile surgical units. So this is a surgical unit which we had developed with Shankar Nethralaya, which operates in rural areas on site. When I say on site, it takes nothing from the environment. Literally, it is completely self-contained, and it has done about close to 16,000 surgeries. That number needs to be revised. The second product which we have, which is already in the market, we commercialized it through a company called Forus Healthcare. It has become a global product. So many of you may not be aware of this, and we can all be proud that there is a medical device product that had technology come from IIT Madras and Chennai, and it has today reached a global scale. The third one, again, it is an eye imaging device, but this is for newborns. Right? Newborns, we'll come to that a little bit, what the problem is. And again, that has become a global device in the last about 2 years or so. The latest success we had is a point-of-care blood test equipment, which has started to scale in the market. And there is a strong pipeline of very complex things that we are doing. So what I will do is, we'll spend about 10 minutes, about 2 to 3 minutes each on how, so I also want to develop on the process a little bit. Right? Why is it challenging? Right? As you can imagine, if you want to build a human service, finally it has to be delivered by a human, but the technology driven, which is regulated in a larger sense, it's a pretty hard problem. So I always sort of explain this to people. So this is the way medical devices and technology works. So an R&D center works on it, an academic institution, and then a company manufactures it. The hospital buys it, right, and pays for it, pays for the technology. But the doctor uses it. The beneficiary is the patient, and the payer for the service is either the patient or the family or the insurance or the government, or sometimes nobody pays. Right? And the government is regulating this whole process. Right? So to give you a sense of how many players are involved, right, in the whole thing. So let's just start with this mobile eye surgical unit. Some of you will be very surprised, it was a very knowledgeable crowd, that cataract is still a very leading cause of blindness in India. I mean, we find it shocking, right? Because cataract we don't even consider it as a disease. It's actually a condition that comes with age. And today cataract surgery cost in India is not only just affordable, it is underwritten by many of the charitable institutions and hospitals. But you'll be very surprised and shocked to hear there is a backlog of as high as 40 to 60% cataract surgery backlog, right, in rural areas. Right? And the causes are largely social. It's very interesting. Right? It's not the affordability that is the killer here. It is the way the infrastructure and social structure is set up. So basically surgery facilities are not available in rural area. And it takes 6 to 7 trips for you to get a cataract surgery done completely. So you go, you get your first eye checkup, then you may have to go and schedule a surgery, then you have to go get a surgery, and then 2 to 3 trips after that to get your glasses fit. And you can quickly do the probabilities. It turns out that half of the people just simply give up. Right? And so this was posed to us as a problem by Dr. Badranath, actually. So I was very young. I walked into his office, and he was like, yeah, so you've done all these things in US? Sit down, let me tell you. So he asked me, what is the leading cause of blindness in India? So I was like, yeah, diabetic retinopathy. He said, no, you've been spoiled by US education, so let me school you. He said, so cataract is the leading cause of blindness. I said, well, why is it so? And then he explained the reasons which I gave you. So he said, is there a way we can actually bring this surgical facility to rural area? I said, see, that's very difficult. Because as you know, a surgery theater is one of the most complex environments you can think of. And how do you make it, first of all, how do you make it in a small place? And first of all, second is how do you move this and run this at the same quality? Right? And so we took upon this challenge about 6 or 7 years ago. And what you see there is a truly cutting edge operation theater, right? But mobile. Right? And there are about 30 to 40 innovations that have gone in to make sure that the sterility requirements are met, air, water, the process, the workflow, so many things. The technology is patented. But at the end of the day, Shankar Nethralaya really made this successful. So at the end of the day, the clinical community has to adopt it and make it happen. And very happy to tell you that it has been operating for about 7 years in all kinds of places you can think of. In fact, the second mobile eye surgical unit that was built operates exclusively in the Jharkhand area. Right? So it's a very challenging area for various other reasons. And you can quickly imagine, so 16,000 surgeries done, who could not have had the surgery. In fact, many of them are actually blind legally and practically for several years when they actually come for this cataract surgery. So that's the backlog that we were able to do. So the second aspect that we looked at, saying, one of the biggest challenges you find in any medical related areas in India is many things that can be prevented, like preventable blindness, take for example. The bottleneck is the early screening does not happen, right? Because there's not enough doctors. Right? So take ophthalmology, for example. There are about somewhere between 12 to 15,000 ophthalmologists in the entire country. That's about it. So, in fact, Chennai itself has close to 1,000 people. So you can quickly imagine the scale and the distribution challenge of this. And so we sort of looked at saying, I mean, how do we handle this problem? So at any given time, probably you need to screen a couple of 100 million people to make sure that they're not getting into diabetic retinopathy or glaucoma at a much later stage. So we started developing a technology, this happened about 5 to 6 years ago, saying that, ophthalmology has a very unique aspect, which is, if I have the fundus image, which is the image of the retina, which is the back of the eye, I can actually use it to do a lot of first-order analysis. Right? In fact, strictly speaking, I don't need the patient after that. I just need the analysis. So we did this. We developed an entire technology that can take an image of the eye, or more specifically the fundus image, can do a diagnosis. It can be transmitted over the web to the specialist. And then we worked with this company called Forus Healthcare, which is a Bangalore-based company, one of the most successful medical device startups. I mean, the company is 10 years old. You can still call it a startup. And they started working on an eye examination camera, which is 1/3 of the cost, 1/3 to 1/5 of the cost of what is currently available in the market. And so we had this wonderful marriage between the image computing technology we had and the hardware they had. And this is something that I want to share with you. We can be proud about this. It has now become a global product. Right? The product, in fact, there are many variations of the product, one for adult, another for newborns. And newborn eye screening is a big problem in India. Right? Again, some of you may be familiar with this. India gives birth to almost close to 3 crore babies a year. Right? So 2.27 million, around that. The premature rate in India is very high. Right? For that kind of a number. So the premature rate in India can be as high as even 10 to 12%. So if you do the quick numbers, you realize these are premature children who have a very high chance of having a premature retina, which is called the ROP, retinopathy of prematurity. Some of our doctor friends will know this. And they need to be screened as early as possible, because once you know they have it, it can be addressed at 99% success rate. So that's the opportunity. But the challenge is, today we don't have a device which is both accessible, probably as close to the labor ward and the delivery as possible. At the same time, that can be operated by a non-specialist. So this is India's challenge, right? So even if I give this equipment for free, let's do a thought exercise. I buy thousands of this equipment, which is today available at $50,000 to $100,000 before this came, and I give it for free. Actually, it causes no impact, it turns out. It's very interesting, the way this value chain works. Because you don't have trained people who know how to use this. And remember, you have to use this on a newborn, which is, most of the times, the newborn is less than 1.5 to 2 kgs. So you should know how to handle it. You should know how to do a diagnosis. So it's not just the cost alone. It is the usability and the accessibility part of the device. And that is something this device has addressed. In fact, it is even at 1/3 to 1/5 of the price, which is called the Trinetra Neo, it's still commercially a successful product. And it is in about 10 countries, that product alone. So this is something that I wanted to share with you. The third example I thought I'll give you, which is even more domestic and local to our problems. There are about 50 to 60,000 labs in the country in tier 2 and tier 3 areas. Right? When we say tier 2, what I mean by that is, let's say, Chengalpet, it's like tier 2. Right? So, Uttaramerur, which is about 50 kilometers from Chengalpet, is more like tier 3 market. You'll be surprised. There are about 120 million blood tests that are being done by these labs alone. Right? Huge number. So India has, what Mohandas was saying is, the scale in India is very huge, but it's fragmented. I mean, this is the classic challenge of India. And it turns out, most of these labs, what they do is they collect the sample and ship it to a city, right? Or the nearest whatever facility. So we started looking at this problem. It's a huge social as well as an economic opportunity. So this company called J Mitra, it's a the leading domestic diagnostic manufacturer in the country, as an IIT Madras alumnus who started this about 50 years ago. And we started working, and what you see right here is the country's first indigenous technology that can do a blood test, specific types of blood tests. We'll talk about what they are. HbA1c. If you're familiar with the term immunodiagnostics, you'll understand what that means. HbA1c, TSH, T3, T4, dengue. So these are about 80% of the immunodiagnostic market in India. So we have a technology, we developed it from ground up, literally from scratch, started about 4 years ago. And today it is a successful product in the market. It's already in about 500 places. And I thought I'll put a complex picture there to get a sense of how this process of innovation and R&D works. You know, it is highly nonlinear, it is highly chaotic. Right? So what makes it succeed is actually the commitment with the partners. Right? So in this case, the industry and our lab decided that no, we will get this through. So you can see how the prototype starts from literally a bunch of wires, and then today it is in pilot production. Oh, sorry, that number is a little off. So it's already about, the production is scaling as we are speaking. And we believe that this will become a very significant impact in the healthcare in the country. So that is the sort of thing I wanted to give you a sense. The latest product and technology that has come out of our lab and the center, which is already becoming commercial, is through a company called Helixon. It's a Chennai-based company, another well-kept secret again. What you see there is perhaps the world's smallest and perhaps the most powerful fever monitor, or rather what you will normally call a thermometer. Right? If you've had children, which most of us are, we had somebody to take care of the child. The biggest challenge in a thermometer today is you have to wake up the child and measure the temperature. And you're doing it with both anxiety and inaccuracy. This is the fundamental challenge. The same challenge exists in hospitals also. So we started working on a particular technology which is this possible, which is it's completely battery, right? It's completely wireless, and the battery lasts for almost like a year to 2 years, and it is priced at, let's say, a very, very affordable thing. So this is the kind of innovations and breakthroughs India can come up with because of the constraints we have. See, normally, if you go to US, people say, yeah, you just take the child to a hospital, because we assume that the overhead cost of that is priced into the overall system. In India, because our constraints, both in terms of resources, our price point, our behavior, our infrastructure, is so severe that these kind of innovations are possible. So, again, there are a lot of other work going on. We are building the country's first indigenous endoscopy, which is a very highly complex technology. We are building robots that can do spine surgery. A lot of very exciting things. If you're ever, you are in Chennai. Chennai is here. So I invite you to come to IIT Madras and look at these things. So this is R&D innovation. Right? I mean, that is one dimension of it. So about 2-3 years ago, when the startups were starting to really become prominent in the Indian innovation and the ecosystem of how to create wealth, we realized there's a lot of healthcare startups that have started to emerge. Right? But of course, they were a little behind e-commerce, fintech, and other things. One of the biggest gaps in these startups, as you can quickly imagine, is you need to be able to bring in all these players as early as possible in your journey. Right? So unlike, let's say, other markets where you can sort of build the product and then let the consumer decide. As I told you, here the consumer and the beneficiary and the payer and the regulator are very different people. So we set up this medtech incubator in IIT Madras Research Park, and today there are about 25 companies, about 25 to 30 companies, I should say, of different kinds, right? Very senior doctors, repeat entrepreneurs, engineers, crazy students, right? Faculty, right? And all kinds of backgrounds, right? And we hope that some of them will actually become very prominent. It's about 1.5 to 2 since we started, 1.5 years, I would say. And some of them already starting to do quite well. And you'll be very surprised that all of these companies are in Chennai. Right? So again, probably we should get rid of our secret cloak and probably have these kind of outreaches much more. And I won't go into the details of it, but one of the themes that we are starting to see in healthcare innovation is a much higher component of digital and software, right? Which is actually very interesting, right? Because healthcare is one of the least penetrated in terms of IT and software. Right? So to give you a sense of it, out of the $100 billion market of overall healthcare IT or software will be less than 2%. Right? So to give you a sense of it, which is a very different number when you go to financial or commerce or banking or even consumer products. So that is starting to change, right? So that is good for India in two ways. One is, as was indicated by earlier speakers, we are very good in software, right? And we know how to utilize software to get things done, which normally will require a physical infrastructure. This is India's challenge, and it has done it several times now, be it records keeping, be it financial, markets, right, banking, insurance, and now we are starting to do this even for food. I mean, imagine, food is supposed to be a human service, it was. Right? So this is one thing which I wanted to leave with you, this thought of digital and software, and of course combined with AI, machine intelligence and all that, is becoming an important theme and a possibility in healthcare innovation. And again, there are several things that are happening. So I want to summarize by saying, one thing is technology, right? It's to develop the technology. Another is to translate them into successful commercial products. And that can happen only with collaboration and partnership. Right? And a successful collaboration partnership essentially means alignment and trust. I mean, that's pretty much what it is. And I found Chennai is one of the best places to do that. Right? And probably has to do with our culture, probably has to do with maybe our conservative culture. I'm not able to exactly put a finger on it, but I found Chennai has one of the best ecosystems for doing these type of innovations. The second is all these challenges which we talked about, physical, infrastructure challenges, limited resources, all these actually force you to innovate in a way that you end up with a technology which is priced at such an attractive level that suddenly when it goes out, it is very attractive in the global market. Right? And this has happened in some other industries. We are starting to see this in healthcare tech, and of course, it has to be scaled. Right? So that's my talk. But, I'm a faculty, so I don't leave the class without questions for you. So I thought I will do that. So we talked about healthcare tech. From a technology standpoint, mostly we have spoken. But here is the question for you, right? The larger challenge. India is at a very interesting, if I were to put it, in fact, it's a peculiar combination of many things in healthcare, right? You go to young doctors today, right? Young meaning 30. In fact, they're all quite worried about their future. Many of them are. Right? In fact, it's very interesting because they say, it is very hard for me to get into a thriving practice. But you ask the government says, I have severe shortage of doctors. Right? Severe, right? When government starts new medical institutions, one of the biggest challenges is how do I get people? So this is one peculiar paradox. You talk to patients, they say, we are all very fond of saying, oh, doctors are making a lot of money, hospitals are making a lot of money, and that used to be the thing. But you go to hospital owners, and especially the mid and small healthcare services, they actually are finding it very hard because, the hospital business works very differently. There is a fixed capital cost, and the operating costs are pretty fixed, right? Because whether the patient walks in or not, you have to burn this cost. That is another combination. And India is also at a very young stage right now, right? So, we are very young. As a result, we are largely, our healthcare costs are much less, as we talk about. As I said, the overall healthcare spending in India is less than about $100 billion, less than 4 to 5% of the GDP. So the question we should ask is, because we are at a sort of an early stage in the healthcare evolution, right? So if you look at the West, it is spending, some of them are spending 12 to 15%. That's huge, right? Can have such a significant impact. How can we actually use technology to create a new model of healthcare where we keep the overhead costs very low. Right? We take some of advantages of our traditional systems of medicine, especially in preventive healthcare. And can we still make a healthcare business a successful business and a thriving business? Right? So I've already given you a very complex sort of a challenge. This is something I want you to think about it, and if you have any thoughts, please do get in touch with us. And I look forward to seeing some of you in IIT Madras some other time. I'll take some questions now. Thank you for listening. So do you pass questions or you can talk directly from there? I think people are collecting questions. Okay, so if I start addressing each question, then probably will take up too much of our time. So I'll try to synthesize the larger themes of what is coming. Okay, so here's a question about, with more AI and robotics, what will be the role of doctors? How will medical insurance work in the context of the above? So, in fact, if you look at it, insurance penetration in India is actually quite low, right, even today. Yeah. The fear, and I would even say the myth of AI and robotic replacing doctors, it's actually a little bit unfounded, I would say. Because at the end of the day, at least, 100 to 200 years from now it may change, but I can give you 1 to 2 generations answer at the best, which is about 30 to 40 years. Humans still needs that human touch and care. So half the time you go to a doctor because you feel better after that. Right? So the role of doctors is not going to go away because of any technology. In fact, it's the other way. Right? Finally, the gatekeeper of healthcare is the physician. Right? So it will only add to the doctor's his ability to deliver the service more rather than actually replace the person. Right, so here's a question. Okay, so this is a more management question, so maybe I should ask that. So can India move up the healthcare value chain with less fluidity? Right, so that is very interesting, right? That's what in fact, I asked the question back to you, saying, how can India keep the costs low? See, because we cannot afford to change our fundamental strength in India, which is healthcare costs in India are very low. Right? I mean, a teeth filling is not more than few hundred rupees to 1,000 rupees. Right? An eye checkup is not more than 500 to 600 rupees. We should move up the healthcare value chain without disrupting without adding to the overhead cost of healthcare. Right? So that is something that I wanted to mention. Feasibility of implementation of mobile eye surgical units in Tamil Nadu, potential hurdles. Sorry, it is already implemented. So in fact, out of the 15,000 surgeries, 16,000 surgeries, probably 10,000 surgeries are done in Tamil Nadu. Right? The rest of the 6,000 surgeries were done in Jharkhand and border of Andhra and Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. How do we bring back such great minds to India and reap the benefits? Actually, you'll be very surprised. Actually, lot of people this is a data point I wanted to tell you, about 15 years ago, not even 15, about 10 to 12 years ago, you will see most of the graduating class of IITs, any IIT you take, majority of them will actually go abroad. You know what is the amount of a graduating class of a BTech in IIT that goes abroad? Any sense? Any idea? Today, in the last 5 years. 50% says the gentleman in the front. Anybody? out of, let's say you take BTech electrical engineering in an IIT, which is typically about 100 to 110 class, how many of them are leaving abroad after their bachelor's? 70%. Anything else? 20%. Yeah, so we have a range, right? So it's actually less than 15%. Right. So there are many myths that get carried over, right? I mean, we have all echo chambers, right, in many places. Less than 15% actually leave the country. So if I'm not wrong, in my department, where I'm a faculty, I think it's less than 10%. Right? So we know that by the number of recommendation letters we write. Right? I mean, I hardly write more than 1 or 2 recommendation letters per year. So it's not that the young minds, so this myth of young minds leaving India, right? I wouldn't call it a myth, so maybe that's a little of generalization. The needle has shifted significantly. Right? I mean, where do you think all the startups which Pai was showing in Bangalore, who do you think are actually running it? It's the young minds that are running it. Right? So that is not something that, in fact, the question I will ask is the extension of the question. How do we actually take advantage of all these young minds and innovate into successful businesses? That's the challenge. So people now youngsters have done their calculation, right? You can do a quick calculation. You figured out that you not only do well in India, in fact, you do better in India if you do well. Right? You win big because India is at a higher slope right now in terms of these kind of startups and innovations. So that is the challenge, I would say. So with that, I think we'll wrap. Vijay, is that fine? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you, sir. May I request Mr. Ravichandran Purushothaman, Senior Vice President MMA, to kindly present a memento to the distinguished speaker. Thank you, Mr. Mohana Shankar, for having accepted our invitation to be part of this session. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for the speaker. Thank you for sharing your insights.
You don't have nowhere to go when the light falls lazily. Just let it be Sunday to me.
The Hindu on Sunday, now with more to read, because Sunday is for reading.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now commence the next session. Give us a few moments as we set the stage. As announced earlier, every year MMA celebrates the International Women's Day by organizing the MMA Women Manager Convention. This year, the theme of the convention is Dreaming Big, and the convention is scheduled to be held on 14th March 2020 at MMA Management Center at Annasalai. We are indeed privileged to host the launch of the book, The Making of Hero, authored by Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal, Chairman Hero Enterprise. We are indeed grateful to Mr. Munjal for choosing MMA for the launch of this book, The Making of Hero.
The Hindu on Sunday, now with more to read, because Sunday is for reading.
This day has got a brand new shine. I'm waking up to make it mine. Kick back and take it slow, 'cause you don't have nowhere to go when the light falls lazily.
Ladies and gentlemen, as announced earlier, we are very privileged to host the launch of the book, The Making of Hero. We will now have a glimpse of The Making of Hero. Can we have the audio-visual, please?
Isn't it lovely when time stops? Nothing to do but connect the dots.
bylanes of
kick
Kamalia
back and
the
take
rugged
it
landscapes
slow.
of Quetta,
'Cause you don't
they
have
escaped to
nowhere
India with
to
little
go.
more than the shirts on their backs.
When the
In the partition-ravaged cities of Amritsar, Agra and Delhi, from the bylanes of Kamalia and the rugged land, more than the shirts on their backs.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now have the glimpse of the making of Hero.
From the bylanes of Kamalia and the rugged landscapes of Quetta, they escaped to India with little more than the shirts on their backs. In the partition-ravaged cities of Amritsar, Agra and Delhi, 4 of the 6 Munjal brothers, Dayanand, Satyanand, Brij Mohanlal and Om Prakash, built their business part by part. Armed with nothing but self-belief, the brothers began with trading and then manufacturing bicycle parts, which soon evolved into the production of bicycles. For post-independence India, the Hero bicycle gave wings to the aspirations of the common man. By 1986, 30 years after its inception, Hero Cycles became the largest bicycle maker in the world. In the next 15 years, the motorcycle venture, Hero Honda, repeated the feat. And both pole positions are held firmly even today. Hero's story is about humble beginnings, the refugee entrepreneurial spirit, hard work, and zeal. It looks at how 4 brothers with little formal education created a world-class enterprise. This is the incredible tale of a principle-driven organization that created exceptional value for a society that desperately needed transportation. How did 4 brothers with distinct personalities work like a cohesive unit and build a manufacturing behemoth? How did they synchronize their strengths? How did they resolve their differences, if any? The story goes deep inside the family spirit, the parivar, that brought together employees, customers, channel partners, suppliers and local communities to create success, welfare and well-being for millions. This is the making of Hero. 4 brothers, 2 wheels, and a revolution that shaped India.
Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for brand Hero, the brand that has made our country very proud. I now invite Mr. Sachin Sharma, Senior Editor, HarperCollins, the publishers of the book, on the dais for the introduction.
Hi, good afternoon. Esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Sachin Sharma and I'm the editor of The Making of Hero. It's an honor to be at the annual convention of MMA today. We at HarperCollins are proud publishers of this book. As publishers, we do our bit in creating a better world by adding to the existing body of knowledge. This book adds immensely to it. For decades, we have looked up to the Western world for management best practices. The hero story has actually so much that the Western world, or rather the rest of the world, can actually learn from it. We all know the behemoth that the hero group today is, and the pole position that they hold in cycles, motorcycles, and many other businesses. This book takes you right back to the roots of where it all started in the early 1950s, where four brothers with little or no formal education created a business brick by brick. Without giving away too much from the content of the book, we also have to sell copies of the book as well. So let me just say that one of the best learnings in teamwork, people management, negotiating, marketing, selling, and above all, self-belief is in The Making of Hero. So do get a copy. Nothing makes a publisher when a good book also sells in good numbers. I'm happy to share with you that the book made its debut in the India top 10. And it's just, by the way, it's just been 3 weeks of the book's release. And this week also, we have also made it to the India best-selling top 10 list. And it's really encouraging when when readers appreciate a good book. Thank you. And Mr. Munjal is here. Please do get a copy of your book signed by Mr. Munjal after the panel discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Sachin. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together as I now invite the author of the book, Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal, to kindly take his place on the dais. A very warm welcome to you, sir. I also invite the dignitaries of this session, Mr. T.V. Mohandas Pai, Chairman, Manipal Global Education, to take his place on the dais. Also invite Dr. Preetha Reddy, Executive Chair, Vice Chairperson, Apollo Hospitals Enterprise Limited, and Mr. Anil Rai Gupta, Chairman and Managing Director, Havells India. Can we have a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? I now request Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal, the author, to kindly step forward and release the book. May I also invite Mr. M. Kumar, Mr. Velayan, and Mr. Subbaya, and Mr. Ram Venkatramani, President MMA, to kindly come onto the dais and join Mr. Munjal in the release of the book. I also invite Group Captain Vijay Kumar, Executive Director. grateful to Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal for choosing MMA for the launch of the book, The Making of Hero. Thank you, gentlemen. Lady, I now invite Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal to share his thoughts on the book authored by him, which will be followed by the panel discussion.
Turn this down.
Thank you and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A special thank you to MMA for giving us the opportunity to release the book here. And a special thank you to my friends on the dais and off the dais. The reason for inviting these three gentlemen, because each of them is actually a part of this story. The idea for writing this book is not new. In effect, this book has actually been in the making for many decades. Right since the 1980s, we started getting requests from a variety of people to write a book either about my father or about the family, the company, the businesses, or a combination of these. And his response was always the same, that you're not supposed to talk about yourself. It's not okay. This is not the done thing. This is not the Indian thing to do. And these requests would pour in from economists, from business specialists, from writers and authors of all kinds. Many of our friends said this is a story which needs to be told. He finally agreed when he was 90, or he was over 90. And I suspect he may partially have agreed because when he turned 90, for his birthday, I called many of his friends and colleagues and asked them to write a letter because we were thinking about what can you give someone like him. He was not a person given too much for material goods. So we asked all his friends to write a letter to him and say whatever they would like about him in that letter. But I said, please send it to me, don't send it to him. And we will publish this in a book and circulate that book to family, friends, and all those who write the letters. But once the letters came in, it was actually both emotional and quite surprising that many of the letters were very, very personal. He had done favors for many people that we knew nothing about. And the majority of the people who had written, by the way, there were hundreds and hundreds of letters. Majority of the people who had written those letters said, he's my special friend. So many people had built this connection with him. And I think when he saw that, and by the way, we published only one copy of the book because the letters were so personal. We decided not to circulate it widely. We just published one copy and gave it to him as a gift. For him to realize, because he would always say, my wealth lies in my relationships, in the family, in the people that I know, the people that I've grown up with. Because one of the things that had got built almost as a rigor into the organization was that other things being equal, somebody who's been working with you will always get more business. And the other thing he had done was to build friendships across the board. Many of our competitors in different businesses, some of them sitting here, are actually family friends. While we were competing in business, but at the same time, these relationships that got built, which are both endearing and enduring through generations. So, just going back a few years, he finally agreed that it's okay to write a book. We picked a team who we thought would be most suited to do this. Unfortunately, they were busy doing another project, and they asked for a bit of time to come back and write this book. By the time they came back, unfortunately, it was late and we lost him. But the requests to write the book continued to come even after that. I thought a little bit about it and I said, since he had agreed, the book should get written. But the reality is, who would know the story more than somebody from the inside? And I thought I would take on this exercise myself. But it was an interesting and an unusual challenge because the story starts in the 1930s, before India's independence and before the partition with what turned into Pakistan. It was hard to get real data. Of course, I knew the stories that I heard many, many times at home, in the family, even at work, about what used to happen individually with the members of the family and what was the environment like. Even if you think about the partition itself, this was the bloodiest migration this planet has ever seen. Millions of people lost their lives. And we had some members of the family who were on literally the last train which came into India. And they moved around to many places and finally settled down in a small town called Ludhiana. After going to Delhi, Agra, Panipat, one of them went off to Bahadurgarh, one went to Mumbai, or Bombay then, and then finally came back and settled in Ludhiana, where they started this business with literally nothing. As you saw in the early lead-on film, they came with the shirts on the backs. Like millions of other refugees, they'd left everything behind, their homes, business, properties, or whatever they had. When I started to write, I actually started to write the story first, the book only about my father. Mr. Rai, who is the managing director of Hero Cycles, called me one day, and he said that he has gathered a lot of information on all the four brothers, and why don't we write a book about them? Now, Mr. Rai and I had written another book earlier, and I said, look, I'm already started, and I'm already doing this, but I think he's right. I took a pause and took a step back and said, if I think back about the way my father behaved, anytime he got recognized, he got an award or a reward, which he got many, many of, he would always say, this is not for me. This is not mine. This belongs to everyone around me. My entire family, all the people in the companies, all our suppliers, all our dealers, all of them are partners and this is theirs. So I thought it would be more appropriate to write a story about all four of them. And then it's not just a story about four of them, it is about the universe around them as well. So it's a family story, it's a business family story, it is a business story, it is a story of the evolution of the economy of India in the early days going all the way down to the 80s, and then more recently. It's also a little bit of geopolitics of the world. The publisher actually asked me when we started, who is the audience? Who are you writing this for? I said, frankly, I would never have thought I was going to write a book. But because we are where we are at, and many, many people have said this is a story which needs to be told, if nothing else, but for the lessons which lie in this story, even for kids in our own family, for them to realize that this is not a cakewalk. When you see a successful enterprise today, everything looks easy. But if you look deep inside, each enterprise has faced many challenges to get to where they got to. If they really get to be successful, if they build size and scale, if they build credibility, if they build brands, there are many sacrifices which go behind this. So therefore, it is important to talk a little bit about this, especially as the connect with the old systems is going away. Therefore, it's also important, right, in the medium that people would be interested to read. So I said, this is therefore a book that I would ideally like to target at as wide an audience as possible. For entrepreneurs, for business managers, for business consultants, for students, for business schools, and for just anybody else. And so they said, you must restrict the book to X number of words and Y number of pages. I did agree, hesitatingly, and I think it was a mistake, by the way. I sometimes think it was a mistake. But what it helped me do is to make it short enough to be an easy read. It's written in a style of multiple stories, but there was a little bit of a message we were trying to give at each stage. So if you saw, the book was released with newspaper and not using excessive plastics. Because sustainability is something that the group, the family, and the business has worked on for the last 50 years, long before it became fashionable, long before it became mandatory. The paper in this book, so there were many versions of this book, so it took quite a bit of time actually, because each time I would write and then I would read it myself and I would find something needed to be different. Finally, the publisher tells me, you have to put a stop to it sometimes, otherwise it will never ever get published. So this actually is the 6th version that I wrote, which has been published. So we sourced paper from responsible forests. We actually did 24 versions of the jacket that you see of the book right here. The idea was to make sure that if you're going to do it, you should do it right, or not at all. So there are many stories in here about how partnerships got built, how relationships got built, the challenges of technology, as to how India, from a nation which was a new country but an ancient civilization, was learning its feet and looking at manufacturing as the backbone of economic activity. So for those, going back to the current times, there are, I believe, a number of lessons here for startups and entrepreneurship, for risk-taking abilities, why manufacturing continues to be important for us, and why it's important to always think ahead, to take risks, to make mistakes, and allow yourselves and those around you to make mistakes, but also to learn from the mistakes. So many, many people need to be thanked for this book. This book has 2 forewords, which are unusual. Normally, it's only one is written. Dr. Manmohan Singh wrote one foreword, and Arun Jaitley, the former finance minister, wrote a second one, which again is unusual because there were 2 people with, well, they were both wonderful gentlemen, but very different schools of thought. We also got wonderful endorsements from significant leaders like Mr. Ratan Tata, Mr. Rahul Bajaj, Sunil Mittal, Deepak Parekh, Anand Mahindra, Bhavish Agarwal. And we had tremendous response. As the publisher just said, in week 1 itself, the book hit the bestseller list. So clearly there is something which has attracted people to the book, and I hope they will see in the book or in the story whatever is useful for them. It's not just a business book. So if somebody wants to read the story book, that's fine too. And a big and special thank you to my panel here. Anil, as many of you know, runs an absolutely outstanding business called Havells. Anil's story and mine is not very different. Anil actually wrote a story on his father a while ago, and I was on the panel exactly in this manner as he is today. His father, like mine, went through tough times and built the business in a very similar manner, based on relationships, people, and sheer hard work and amazing determination. Preeta is familiar for many of you. Preeta and her family truly brought us actually standardized quality healthcare. There was no concept of that before this in India. Started by her father, but Preeta and her sisters are doing an absolutely amazing job for not just continuing to maintain it, but to build it out into a modern, contemporary, caring healthcare system. I don't need to introduce Mohan to anyone. Mohan is seen more on TV than any of us see him personally. He's an amazing, amazing mind, and he's not shy of airing his views. People talk about Indians having views. Every Indian, they say, has more than one view on the same thing, and no Indian is shy of airing his or her views. But here is a person who is both thoughtful, considerate, and forward-looking, and an absolute storehouse of knowledge. So Mohan, big thank you for agreeing to moderate this panel. The idea of this panel was that since this is a story, the book is a story of a family business, and we don't often realize that worldwide, not just in India, worldwide, the largest number of jobs, the largest amount of revenue to governments actually comes in from family-owned businesses. In Asia, in Europe, in North America, Latin and South America, they have an important role to play in creating a culture, philosophy, ethos. If they do it badly, it affects the entire environment. If they do it well, that sets an example for many, many others to follow. So thank you, Preeta and Anil. Truly appreciate this. There are many in my office who've helped support the writing of this book. And I have this big special thank you to Ajay and his team who've organized this event, Ashwini and Prakash and Jaideep in my office who helped me to put all of this together. The number of people actually I can go on is a lot, but the result is here with you, so hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much, and good luck for your annual session.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Munjal, for sharing your thoughts. Ladies and gentlemen, the book is available for sale. Please pick up a copy and you could get autographed by the author. Thank you, Mr. Munjal, once again for selecting MMA to launch the book. Ladies and gentlemen, we now commence the panel discussion on business valuation. How do we assess the true worth of a family business? To moderate the session, I hand over the proceedings to Mr. T.V. Mohandas Pai.
Thank you. Sunil, congratulations. Great book, great story, an inspiring legacy for everybody around the world. Now, you built two world-class industries, two very, very large industries out of a very, let us say, deindustrialized country like Dr. Singh said. Now, when you started on the road, did you have this aspiration of building the world's largest company, of using great technology, processes, or you learned as you went and did what you knew best?
So Mohan, this business started not with any grand plan, by the way. This business started as a tool for survival and providing for the family. What they were doing was using common sense. It's a whole different matter, by the way, that common sense is not very common. And if you think about what they did, what are now called contemporary business practices, management practices, governance practices, as also manufacturing practices, is what they turned out. Things like just-in-time inventory, we believe JIT came from Japan, but if you look back at the history of this company, that's what it practiced. But it practiced it not, again, because any consultant or somebody told them, but because they told all of the suppliers, we don't have a lot of money, we don't have a lot of resources, only supply us what we need today so that we can use it, produce and sell the bicycle and not have to stock either incoming or outgoing goods. And by the way, we will pay you on time so that your cash cycle works and you continue to supply us as efficiently as you can. And there is a whole host of practices of this nature which started off, whether it was on the shop floor, or it was governance, having outsiders on private companies' boards, which of course was uncommon in India in those days, including having some women on the boards. Today, all of these are being legislated as common new variety of governance practices. But the organization actually started on this very basis. So what it tells you is what people call motherhood statements actually work.
And the management style, in a part of the book you said, it is a bit Punjabi. You use the word Punjabi. Remember that? Now tell me, what kind of a management style was that? You were very parivar-oriented, very paternalistic, took care of people. And this compassion came from the fact that you belong to a large joint family where your mother taught you values, your father went away to the Gurukul when you was young, and this sustained throughout. And you told me once that your attrition in Hero was negligible. People stayed with you, people created value. So what is this kind of a Punjabi marketing style? We are in Chennai, there's a Chennai style, so maybe we should learn from you.
So I don't know what the typical Punjabi style is, but this was set up like a large family. And literally, like I'm saying, this gentleman I called, are friends of mine and friends of my dad's going back decades. And that's the same thing that was done in the business on an everyday basis. The people who worked in the companies, people who were suppliers and those who were dealers, were always considered a part of this large family. There are some of them sitting in this room right now. I saw some of the dealers walked in with me when I came in. And the ability to treat people as equals and give them regard and respect and listen to people, I think had a big dramatic impact. And by the way, what I told you was attrition was not low, attrition was actually zero. It was zero for many, many decades. It is different today. In the last 20 years, we see people leave. But interestingly, about 80 to 90% of the people who leave always send a message, can I come back? Because they actually have no comparison as long as they're in one place. They actually don't know what the rest of the culture is like outside. So that has been one big strength, that it's a very people-driven organization. So the strength doesn't come from the technologies, and we do use one of the most modern technologies in the world. We started using robotics, by the way, 40 or 50 years ago. It doesn't come from the buildings, and we make some of the fanciest buildings in the world. We have the world's largest green roof in one plant. We built the world's greenest automotive plant. But that's not the strength. It is still the people.
And Sunil, you were able to hire very good people. Now, one of the challenges about family businesses, in many family businesses, is the distance you have between the families, members who work in the company, and the people you hire. But you treated them very differently. Did it come out of what your mother taught you when you were young, to respect elders, to treat people with respect, and always be respectful? Or it was a deliberate style that you picked up just because you wanted to be competitive?
I don't think it was a conscious thing. So I actually never even thought about whether my mother alone taught us. I think it was my mother, my father, my uncles, my aunts, my grandparents too. My grandmom used to go every morning at 4 a.m. to clean the floor of the Gurdwara, which was a few hundred yards away from home. She was not a Sikh, by the way, but she would still go every morning and clean the floor as just seva, as things you do for others. And you actually learn some of this by osmosis. I don't think you can actually teach this too much, but if people see this being practiced, this is something you adopt and adapt as your own style. You can, of course, do it consciously, but I think if you do it as a put-on job, then you can do it for a short time. And because they were doing this all the time, so we didn't really have to look around too much for this kind of learning. And I don't mean to sound too much of a do-gooder, but it actually works, because as I said, reality, the people, we never hired by the way, the toppers in the business school, etc. It was people, ordinary people like you and me, who actually got the environment, facilitating environment, which allowed them to become heroes, to be able to perform the way they did.
And also, Sunil, you were born in a different era, different environment. Family was large, you were growing, maybe didn't have much money, and you were frugal. Now, how do you pass on your cultural values to your children? Values of humility, of treating people with respect, of having compassion, working together with people. Have you been successful in passing, when I say you, your generation, have you been successful in passing on all those values you got to your children to make them successful? And also, do they have the fire in the belly that you had when you people, your sons, came into the business?
It's a very good question, by the way, because it's well known that for most family-owned businesses, the business gets destroyed by the third generation. As much as 94% of the businesses get destroyed for these very same reasons. So we attempted early on to build practices of how we operate, which, as we learned, hopefully our kids would learn, but it gets tougher with every successive generation, because they are growing up in a very different environment. They are growing up as children who are seeing wealth around them, as they're seeing material goods around them, unlike what we saw. But what we did was we continued to practice ourselves to be frugal, to be careful, to be giving, to be caring. And I think we are very blessed that somebody upstairs is looking after us. And I look at our next generation, majority of the children, many of them now are working, have adopted very similar styles It's not all of them, but a majority of them. Because I'll tell you, one of the differences, one of the challenges I find, and I've seen this in many of my friends' families too, we tell our kids, you must go to the best places to educate yourself. And in a sense, we're telling them you should be independent-minded. Then when they come back, we're letting them, by the way, you should only do what I'm going to tell you to do. So we create a conflict there ourselves. And there is, in any case, a conflict in business and family, as you know, in the nature as to how they operate. In a family, you try to give equality to everybody. So you're a completely socialist pattern. In a business, you're saying, you want the right person for the right job, so you will recognize those who perform well, who do better. So you want to give them better compensation. So there is a built-in conflict, which is why family-owned business is a complex entity, and therefore it needs a little bit of more thinking, and its impact is immense. So it's absolutely critical that the next generation of entrepreneurs and owners and promoters of family-owned businesses are given training not only as good managers, but also as good owners, and these two are distinctive.
Sunil, last question before I go to Preeta. I think you made the statement that family is socialism, business is capitalism. Can you explain that to us?
So as I just said, in a family, if you have 3 kids, you want them all to be treated the same. So that is by nature socialist. So you want everybody to get similar facilities, to have the same opportunities. If you're going to have 3 weddings in the family or 2 weddings, you want that all of them to be somewhat similar, which is not at all the case in business. The business, by its very nature, is fiercely competitive, and which is encouraged. That's how all of our organizations run, and that's how they're successful. So you have to be careful and understand there's a fine line between the two. As to how you tread this line is very important. There are families in which you say all the members of the family will work and all of them will be treated the same. It's very rare to find those families building global businesses.
Preeta, 1 doctor, 4 girls, still together, built India's biggest hospital chain, life sciences, compassionate, and does something which every person in this country wants. In a different way, he built the cycle, you built, medical care. Now, when your dad started off and we entered business, did you have a view of what you would be or how you evolved? And how is it all the girls stayed together in the business and are still running the business?
So good. I'll tell you a story. When my dad started off, where we tease him and we say we were cheap labor because daughters feel very bad that their father's working so hard. So over the weekends and whenever we could, he was at HM Hospital, a very busy doctor, and would work 24/7. And if a patient was sick, then it was everyone's problem. My mom even would go into the puja room and pray so hard for that patient to survive. So that's how we grew up. And even today, it can be somebody close to us, someone we feel bad for, but there's a beautiful temple she set up at the back. And we would conduct pujas for them. So I think it's part of our DNA. And that helped because the 4 daughters, like Charlie's Angels, would do anything the dad said. Honestly.
Pratap Reddy's Angels.
I swear. I hope we're the angels. I'd love to be called that. I think one among the 4 of us is a bit of a devil, but that's another story. Sunil knows her well. But having said that, I think even today, we would do, if my father wants it, we would do it. We don't question him. So it kind of sets a culture. It makes it easy for the leadership. Sometimes the finance professionals or the clinicians would go and say maybe there's a better way. But the thing about my father is that he's always 10 steps ahead, especially in investing into clinical work, methodologies, hiring clinical talent, or investing into technology. We invested in something which was definitely not going to give us returns. We all know that. So when he was asked by the board or private equity, he said, listen, patients have to get well. The rest of the numbers and all you people worry about. So we grew up with a culture like that, that it's, it's clinical outcomes, business of caring, caring comes first and business afterwards. So I think that culture kind of keeps all of us together. And there's a bit I read in, Sunil's book last night about how everybody, the four brothers, respected each other in terms of decision making, and if anything had to be done, it was always with a discussion. And I think we've kind of imbibed that culture among us, that we don't really take major decisions on our own. And it's we had to sell our insurance business, but it was a huge discussion among the family. And then of course go to my father, and he said, yeah, okay, it breaks my heart, but it makes sense. So I think this respect for each other is what keeps families together. And also you have to really understand that each one has a strength. Among the four of us, Sunita's fantastic with finance and strategy, and we don't even question her. Shobana is the most entrepreneurial. She's built already 3 businesses by herself. Sangeeta, we call her Saraswati because she's the wisest of the lot. Fantastic with diplomacy and that depth of wisdom. So I think we have to respect that. And you have to ask me what I am. I'm the eldest, so I'm the servant leader. And I'm the one who really respects and sees what is available with all 3 of them. So sometimes, you need to be able to get the best out of everyone. And it's, I love saying it, but I say I'm the housekeeper in the company, because every time there's a problem, then it comes back to the eldest, even with the next generation. We have 10 in the next generation, and they're fine. All children are a bit spoiled today thanks to Instagram, I must confess. But I think when they need, either they need advice or they need to be pulled out of some little issue in their own businesses or whatever, then they come. So I think each one has a space. You have to be respectful of boundaries, and you have to give a lot of respect to each one's strength. And there is no point, competing with each other, because you can only be very good at, something which you're very good at. There's no point trying to be as good as somebody else when they have the strength. It's almost like an orthopedic surgeon wanting to be a cardiac surgeon. You can't do both. And if we have that mindset, I think, the 4 horses will run the chariot not too badly.
So a new book, 4 sisters, 1 bed, and a revolution that shaped India.
Well, we did a book, and it was the healer and the healthcare revolution, and we sat with someone and we don't have the writing talent or the way Sunil is, but it happened, and there is a book. We might have to do version 2, but I don't know about the 4 sisters.
But Prita, in the work that you do, your father was a superstar as a doctor. He practiced as a doctor. And handling good doctors is a very difficult thing to do, because they're all individual performers. They have their own reputation. They have their brand. People go to prima donnas. People go to a hospital for the doctor, and the hospital is secondary. But how did your dad create such a sense of loyalty among some of the most extraordinary doctors in this country?
There's just simple cultures which happen. My dad just turned 87, but whoever walks into his room, he will stand up and wish them. All the time. So I think, and even now he walks around the hospital corridors. The clinicians see that, and they know that, at any time it's an open door policy, they can go to him. And whether they're right or wrong, at least they will get an answer or a decision. That happens, and I think that culture is passed down not only to our generation, but to some of the children who are working with us in the hospital. The clinician, the prima donnas really, they need somebody to tell them that they're always right, and when they're wrong, it has to come from them. You can't go and tell a prima donna you took the wrong step. But they will come back and say, could I have done something better? And I think that wisdom and maturity is something we need for the clinicians. But now technology is helping because data, everything is driven by data. And if clinical outcomes are not that great as they should be, the data goes to them. So we don't have to call them in and correct them. So they know for themselves that, it's time to change, it's time to have robotics or do minimally invasive work. So everything happens because it's backed by data, and I believe that we should never just let our emotions get in the way. And when you deal with a difficult situation, it's always good to be backed by facts and data.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this last bit is an important point about emotions. So there is again a conflict here. We always tell people, please follow your passion. Okay? And that's what we're telling our children now, by the way. If you have something you're madly crazy about, go and do that as a business. At the same time, you tell them you have to draw this line where emotion for the business is concerned. Because there are times when you have to do things exactly like Preeta said. You have to sell a business, you have to shut it down, you have to fire people, you have to change machines. All of these are part of what you do. So you have to be able to wear these hats at different times. I think that's important as a leader. The ability to adapt and change is as important as good follow-through.
Anil, let me come to you now. You waited long enough. Another extraordinary story. I mean, you are building the Samsung of India. I'm using Samsung, don't get upset, for people to understand what you could build. But your father started off on the journey in a very small way. He used to cycle himself, sell himself, and you had a family that worked together and grew. Extremely hard work. How did you see your father in the business? What is it that he brought to the table to make you grow to be what you are today?
I think, thank you very much. The first and foremost thing, very similar to Shri Munjal, Brijmohan Lal Munjal ji, very similar, he was a people's man. So he would be able to, make great relationships, he would be able to motivate people, he would be able to understand where his strengths and weaknesses are and how he can complement strengths with the people around him. And I think that innate, initially as for family sustenance and for sustaining himself and the family around him, he built this business more to, earn a living. But then he built a team around him, and not only employees and colleagues around him, but also the larger stakeholders around him, whether it's the dealer network or the vendor network. It's all how you create those relationships over a longer period of time and make business sense as well as economic sense for everybody around them. Not, we keep talking about maximizing shareholders' wealth. And a family business, even at the size when it was very small, it was thinking about maximizing the stakeholders' wealth rather than just the shareholders' wealth. That's something which, these self-made entrepreneurs could very well understand right from the very beginning. And that's something which he had right, from in the early 1960s and 70s. He also came from Punjab, the same place where the Munjal family came from. And you talked about this Punjabi culture. It was this, innate sense of entrepreneurism and ability to take risks, but calculative risks. Very interestingly, we were talking on the way here. In this book, Munjal Saab says, "Dekh lenge." When Honda offered them the partnership for motorcycles, and he was actually looking for scooters and motorcycles. So he said, "Okay, dekh lenge. We'll manage. Just even without scooters, we'll manage." So that ability, just like the Amitabh Bachchan of Sholay saying, "Dekh lenge," that ability to take that calculative risk and have the vision for the future, I think that's something which these born entrepreneurs are capable of. And that's what, my father brought to this business.
And your father had a very innate ability to build a network. He knew all the dealers, they're part of his family. He knew the children being born in that dealer network. He went for the weddings, he went for the funerals, he went everything. What motivated him? The fact that they're important for the business, or he felt that they're part of the extended family? Was there innate, let's say, passion within him to say, this is my family? I mean, you are his son, That's fine, but they are my family too. I must look after them, just like his father. I think his father knew all the dealers, everybody by name. And I remember one time, I think, Sunil, when the market was not good and you had to sell, and they all bought the stuff immediately because they said, whatever you want, we'll do it for you. This loyalty that was built up, what is the secret? What drove him to do that?
I think, frankly, the way we look at it now, maybe we can say that he felt that it is good for business. But my father himself was a dealer, before he started manufacturing. So he had a shop in the electrical market of Delhi. And he used to see how companies, with those quotas and the licenses, they used to treat the dealers. It was almost as if they were selling drugs to these dealers, and so he never liked the way the companies dealt with the dealers. And when he became a manufacturer, he took it on himself that he will take care of his dealers. And he would always tell me, even till the last days, he would tell me that, we have to take care of the dealer families in a way that we take care of their growth, which means for their families, we need to grow their business. Forget about growing your business. We need to think about the growth of their business. We need to think about their profits. And we need to think about their peace of mind. The third very important thing, that we don't want the dealers to be thinking anything, whether it's their children families or children education, somewhere or the other, they should earn enough money that they don't have to worry about those kind of things, which I had to worry about when I was a dealer. So, he would just go to that extent of taking care of the livelihoods of the dealers, the welfare of the dealers so much that, the dealers would do anything for them. I remember the first time when my father and I met Brijmohan Munjalji, and he said, Mr. Gupta, I've heard about you. You take care of your dealers a lot. And I think we should get together because my dealers' children are now growing up. And I need to think about their growth of business. And maybe there could be some sort of a tie-up between Havells and Hero, and how, some business can be associated so that they can grow their businesses. So that's the kind of concern these gentlemen brought to the business for the dealers. And I think those relationships, definitely when you do something for somebody, they give you back.
And Anil, your focus on quality. Focus on quality right from the beginning, the brand, and buying the brand name Havells, a brilliant move. Today, when people think of Havells, you think of a global brand, right? And it brings to mind some very nice things. And this focus on technology, we just went to your plant in Gilot, where you have a fully robotic plant for AC making, and you say that you're going to beat China in cost and in quality. Where did this focus on technology come? Sunil has this focus on technology. Preeta has a focus on technology. Technology and upgradation and quality has been in the heart of what the three of you did. Where did this come from? It came from your father at that time, right?
I think, as Sunil just said, family businesses look at their business for a very long-term vision. They don't come there for the next 3 or 5 years. They don't have a private equity kind of a mindset, or, a mindset where you want to flip the business. So you want to sustain the business for 25, 50, 100 years.
Your PE is very high, it's an FMCG PE, unbelievable. And don't tell me that last 2 quarters, it's not okay, but, the market was bad, but everybody trusted you.
Right. No. So, so again, this also gets from the trust over a longer period of time. So you see the future. And I think when you start looking at your business from a very long-term perspective, then you want to compete with the best in the world. You want to say that I will invest today for the future, so that my business is sustained over the next, not 3 to 5 years, but 5 to 10, 20 years. So that's when you start investing in technology, manufacturing. You want to be the best in the world so that you can, again, taking care of the larger network of stakeholders rather than shareholders. And if customer is also viewed as your stakeholder, you want to do the best for your customer. You want to give them the best quality at the right price, the right economics. For that, you need to invest in technology, you need to invest in manufacturing. And I think it all comes, today it sounds like management practices, but it all comes from the needs, the need created within, right from, as he said, just from common sense, that if you need to do the best, you need to invest.
Well, many families don't do that.
Well, again, again, we were talking on the way here. it's Sunil mentioned one line which actually clung to me when he launched my book a few years back. And he said, when the business is small, the business is for the family, which means for the sustenance. But when the business starts becoming bigger, the family is for the business. So which means you keep reinvesting into the business, your family needs are taken care of, your house, your day-to-day living expenses are taken care of, but then rest everything you are doing for the business, which means whatever profits you are earning, you keep reinvesting back into the business. So the moment you start distinguishing that and you start, making different empires other than, your existing empires, then things go bad. And I feel that as long as the family is for the business, these things don't go wrong.
Sunil, here is a tough question. I mean, every question is easy for you, but not a tough question. Every family thinks of the company as their property. It's theirs. Belongs, they have a proprietary interest, which is good and bad. How did you people ensure that none of the corporate resources were used for personal purposes? Did you ever use corporate resource for a personal purpose? Or how did you ensure the separation?
I think this is very important and critical, especially in the governance environment that the world is in today. Some practices which were accepted as normal 20 or 30 years ago would actually get you behind bars today. And many people have seen that kind of a situation. So we were actually fortunate to have grown up in an environment where the norm was to do the right thing. Not just the legal thing, by the way, but also the ethical thing. And I think if you put that filter, so what I could tell all the people that when we hire senior people, so there are two questions that I actually ask them, and two pieces of advice that I'd like to give them, is that you as a manager will be expected to make decisions every day. So if you have a problem, put your hand on your heart, and if it says that's the right decision, go ahead and take it, and we will completely support you, even if it goes wrong. Because if you're taking it in the best interest, with the best intent, and with the right frame of mind, you will do the right thing. But it's not always easy to do, and you're right, because the environment got created in India especially. It's a lot easier today, which is why actually one of the reasons I thought it's important to write. It used to be much worse than it is today, but it's still not okay. It's still not free enough. You put unnecessary restrictions, people will try and find ways to go around them. Part is, and sometimes people have become habitual, even when that restriction is removed, they continue to behave the same way. If you think a little bit today, when the demonetization got announced in India, we said there's too much excessive cash in the economy, and people are running businesses based on cash and not in the normal economy. Now, for a while, it dipped down. I'm told today, and I checked this only last week, there is more liquid cash today in the economy in India than there was on the 9th of November when demonetization got announced. So I'm just wondering, is this a habit that we have? Can we not, as a people, as a nation, as an economy, as an industry, say that this is the way we will do business? Because, by the way, there is a benefit to doing business straightforward in a straightforward way. And I can give you hundreds of examples. It may not be easier, but it is actually much better. And this is something I think more people, more responsible individuals, more responsible leaders need to talk about a little bit.
Prita, you two did the same, right? Separated corporate resources from personal resources. How did you bring about this separation? Did any point of time you thought this company is yours? Well, whatever I spend, it is mine. Or,
by the way, all of us think these companies are ours, by the way. I
tell you. Yeah,
we always think these companies are ours. But as I said at the start, you have to be careful between passion and emotion. If you can draw that line, then it allows you to understand this a little bit better. Otherwise, not difficult at all to cross the line.
Rita?
So we started off with very little. It was dad and starting the business. So everything actually went into it. And so Anil's statement made a lot of relevance to me that the family is for the business and the business is not for the family. So when everything you have has to go into the business, you actually own that. So if you take anything away from, that's also the family coffer. You know, you own maybe a little bit of it, but it's still yours because you built it up and you've put everything into it. So why would you take more than what is rightfully yours from it? So I think it's part of our DNA, and systems also have to be set in such a way that, you know, there's perpetuity in that discipline. And that we've learned, you know, it was an effort, we've done what we've had to do. So I think using beyond what is allowed, you just have to set a system in where you can't do it. And, you know, silly example, but even if any of us or our families need healthcare, we're all insured. So you can't...
You actually pay for the healthcare in hospital.
Well, we're insured, so the insurance pays for it. But at least that discipline is set in. It's not a free-for-all. And I think, you know, these kind of things have to be part of a family business. And when you build the business, that's what happens.
I must add, if any television or any air conditioner comes to my house, I have to pay to the dealer. It doesn't even come directly from the factory to me, which I have to pay for it. I have to buy from the dealer and I have to pay for it. But just also on this, there is a financial sense to it as well. If you say the P's are high as let's say 40 or 50, if you take 10 lakhs out of your company, you're actually reducing your worth by 5 crores.
No. The question is, you separate it out because that's the right way, or because it makes business sense?
No, I think it's the right way. The first and most important thing is the right way.
And it also makes business sense.
It also makes business sense.
And both of them come together. Folks, I want 5-8 minutes more. Those who want to listen for 5-8 minutes, put your hands up, or I'll end it. Okay. So thank you very much. Sunil, now, I'm going to ask 2 questions to all of you. Sunil, you had an extraordinary father. She has an extraordinary father. He had an extraordinary father. What kind of a person was your father? What did you admire most in him? Did you quarrel with him? Did you disobey him? Did he listen to you? He overruled you all the time. I allowed you to work. Explain to us, what kind of a person was your father?
There is a term in Hindi called saral. Okay? He was a very easy person. Easy person to be with, easy person to deal with. And he always had a very young mind. So he was open to suggestions and ideas, which you normally see as people get older, their views get fixed. Their ability to be flexible, adaptable, to accept new ideas becomes less and less. And I never saw that with him, Madhavi. He was very, very open. And I have
Was that only to his sons or to everybody?
Everybody.
Anybody.
By the way, that's one good thing he did. He didn't create that distinction. I had a little bit of an advantage. I managed to spend more time with him than most others, and I mean including the family. And maybe that's why I thought I should write the book. And I managed to spend more time not only with him, but also with my uncles. Incidentally, the dealership, I wanted to interrupt you. When you were talking about dealers, it was my uncle, Mr. O.P. Munjal, who started this connection with the dealers. And then, of course, my father took it on and he went even way beyond. So they actually, the other thing about them was not just him, is how the 4 of them, unfortunately actually 3 of them, because the eldest one passed away in 1968, how they as a collective and individuals behaved. Completely different, but completely complementary to each other. So that made life a lot easier for others to deal with them as well.
Rita, your father.
So, about my dad, if you ask my mother, she will say, oh my God, he is so tough. If you ask the 4 of us, we would say we will never cross the line which he sets.
You listen to him even today?
Even today. And, but the thing is, if you go to him with a problem, he's 10 steps ahead, and something he told you today which you don't think may work, actually works. So I don't know what it is about him, but that wisdom which he's got and the intuitiveness, I think he's had it. And somehow you don't feel like not listening to him. So there's something about him. And then when he walks the hospitals, or we see these people, they look at him and they say, oh my God, he's a healer. And then when we're trying to recruit somebody and we're a little unsure if this great prima donna clinician will join. And then we take him to my dad's office and he looks at us and he says, we can't say no to this man. So I think that in, different facets of my dad. But the one thing which I have seen is that it's never about doing something for himself. And it's always, for the greater good, and it's for the passion of healthcare and healing. And the latest mantra, which none of us are able to fathom why he's doing it, but it makes a lot of sense, is he says, do whatever you can to keep people out of hospitals. You have this many beds that will get filled in, but what if you caught the disease early and they actually didn't have to come to you? So, he's the type who will turn a business completely upside down because it's for the greater good. And if it makes business sense, by the way, so be it. So I think that's to us what he is.
Anil?
I think all our fathers were born entrepreneurs, right? So I always consider myself as being a trained entrepreneur rather than being a born entrepreneur. I was fortunate to be under the tutelage of a born entrepreneur. Born entrepreneurs have all these things what they're speaking about, the openness, the vision, the ability, the wisdom to see. Humility, what others are not able to see that. But as children, I must say that it's not difficult, it's not easy to work with born entrepreneurs. They have their own whims and fancies, they have their own ups and downs. And, I've written very honest things in my book, about the kind of things I would have to face with my dad. But again, because of humility and because of being open, you had the ability, if you had the patience, to go back and again revisit any topic which he has probably not fully understood or not fully, agreed with earlier. And that ability was amazing just because he was a born entrepreneur. He was not just be listening to me, but every person. He would call up dealers to, if he had a business idea, he would call up dealers and take their advice as well. So he was very open to advice, and I would never think of having any problem, a long-term problem. Short-term problems, always, tiffs would happen day in, day out, but those were all very, very short-term. But in the long term, I would never have a problem with him.
I want to add two things. One was, he had this amazing childlike fascination for new things, new ideas, new technology, new place, new people. He was always looking at where he could find something new and how that would fit into the larger scheme of things. The challenge, by the way, that I faced for a few years, not for too long, was being compared with him. Whenever you go to a government office or somebody else, instantly they would start comparing you. And that actually can be a challenge.
And Sunil, final question before we close. Sunil, you had the mind of a strategist. If you read the book, you write very clearly that you thought of the future for the family, approach the family, how you're going to create the future, where people have their freedom, maybe separation, maybe everything else. And why do you think that was necessary for you to do? And what made you do it? And work through the entire process without rancor. We've not seen anything in the media. No rancor, no unhappiness. And it worked. Now we are all there together and the name carries on.
So, the subject of family-owned business is a very fascinating one. There's a lot of research going on in the world now, especially in universities, business schools, and business consulting firms are doing a fair amount of research. I've actually been lecturing on this subject for about over 30 years now. So when I suggested this to my father and my uncle, they actually got upset with me. They got annoyed with me, and they said, people give examples of our family. And our old friends will tell you that it was a fact. People would say everybody works together, lives together, stays together, goes on holidays together. The businesses are doing so well, the family is all friendly. I said, exactly. Most times, this issue is only approached when there is a fight in the family or there is a big challenge in the business. And then everybody becomes selfish and they're pulling in different directions. You're not thinking of the larger wholes. You're not even thinking of the point that Anil just made. Your value and wealth lies in your business. If you can ensure continuity and success of business, your value, like we never had personal wealth till only a few years ago. None of us had individual homes as well. So everything was in the companies, in the businesses. So again, to the point I made earlier about their having this young-eyed mind, first they got upset, and then after a few days they actually called me back. Are you sure? They asked me lots of questions. Why, how, how this can be done, and why would we do it, and what would be the outcome? And I actually gave them reasonable assurance based on whatever I'd seen around the world. Because the fascinating thing is, about 80+% of issues in family-owned businesses are actually identical around the world. The solution, however, is unique to each family and to each business. Broadly, it's not different, but the specifics change. So I just suggested that I can almost guarantee you, in fact, I said I can't guarantee you, I can assure you, that the companies will be better off, and the family will be better off, and we will remain friends. Their response was, then we must do it. Not only should we do it, then we must do it.
But what made you come to the conclusion? That's the mind of the strategist.
So the conclusion was because I was seeing how we are bringing up our children, to the point I made earlier, that some of them were very independent-minded, and they had views which were dramatically different from the way the things were going on. I said, they are our kids, so you have to respect their views. And there will be a conflict if you don't handle it now, and that conflict can blow up and doesn't affect the family alone. It affects businesses, it affects the entire environment, it affects the universe you live in. And this way, we have actually ensured entrepreneurship. If you look at the collective whole of the companies, we are much bigger today than we were before the restructuring. The family all works together. All our foundations still work together, by the way. I was just telling Anil on the way, last month we had my mother's birthday, 90th birthday, and we invited only family. There were 300 of us in the lunch. Nobody except family. Everybody still comes in for all family events.
Okay, Sunil, we have to close now. We are listening to you for 1 hour, but we want some takeaways. Tell us 5 things we must take away from your life experience, your book, so we can also learn and build huge family businesses, become billionaires and all that nice stuff.
So the one thing we must remember is not to take ourselves too seriously. Because I've seen as Indians, we tend to take ourselves too seriously. That gets us upset, that makes us angry, and we react to things which is not logical. The second thing is that there is no one destination, by the way. It is the journey. If we do not learn to enjoy the journey, frankly, you're paying, it's like hell every day to go to work, to do stuff. And then the destination doesn't even matter if you're suffering all the way through. The journey is fantastic. The third, I think, which is important is that we must realize that all the people, when I look around in this room, we are completely blessed. We live in a country where 25 million people do not get 2 square meals a day. We don't only have just the meals, we have the ability to say yes and no to things. Not too many people have that ability. So we need to realize that we have a responsibility bigger than ourselves. We must reach out beyond ourselves and do things not just for our families, but for others who are less fortunate, because we have the ability to. And that is a responsibility, unfortunately, is not being taken enough care of at this moment. The next, I think, we tend to lose this feeling every now and then about us being part of the nation. Nation building is a role that all of us have. We must attempt that whatever we do, we should not just do it right, but we should also do it well, because that is true nation building. And I mean, I can go on for many other.
Last one.
The last one, I think, is that the most valuable thing that we are given is our relationships.
Maintain relationships.
If we can nurture them, maintain them, the value of that is absolutely immeasurable.
Preeta. Now your turn, Preeta. Tell us 5 things.
I think, the empathy and compassion, and I'm saying this because of the business we're in, that we should never ever lose the people connect. Because it can be a circumstance, never carry that baggage with us, no monkeys on our back. The art of listening, I think, is very important. While, we think we might know everything and we can go on saying 100 things, you might lose that opportunity of learning if you don't have the art of listening. Also, I would agree that, we lose the beauty of the journey because we're running for the destination. So we forget to smell the roses on the way. There is beauty everywhere. And I think we need to learn and see that. Again, that sense of gratitude, because I feel that again, it's because I don't know anything except the hospital business, honestly. And I love beautiful things. But when I walk into the hospital and I see a lot of, patients there, I keep worrying about the number who actually couldn't get in there and get that kind of health care. So that's the nation building aspect. Can we give back our learning so that more people can access? And I'm actually very happy about Ayushman Bharat. It might hurt the private sector healthcare, but it definitely gives, opens the doors for so many other people. So I think I do agree on the nation building aspect. The final bit about it is that we need to be, we're in a position where we're responsible for hundreds of people. If we say, okay, we have 70,000 employees, we need to take it very seriously, and anything which we do will affect them. And so I think the responsibility which has come from everybody working so hard, and the trust, I would say that we should never let down on the trust factor, because I think that's super important.
Anil.
So I'll probably not say 5 things because, many of the things are common, but I'll attempt a couple of them. So first and foremost, again, relationships is the most important asset and wealth that we have. Start with the family first. If you have great relationship within your small family, then larger family, the colleagues' family, and then of course the entire community around. So you need to keep building these relationships and doing the right things for nurturing those relationships. I think both of them talked about nation building. First of all, I must say that while we talked about being blessed, I think we as citizens of India, we keep complaining about what we don't have in India, but I think we must say that we are the blessed ones, that we are living in our prime of our careers during this time in India, because probably this is the fastest and going to be the fastest economy for the next 20-30 years. I think we are going to be blessed that we have been born in this time in India. And I think third thing, very important, I go back to Gita and say that, doing your karma and doing your karma in the righteous manner is the most important thing you can do for, the entire community as well as the nation building. So whether you're running a business, whether you're, making a new factory, as long as it can support the nation building in terms of employment generation, in terms of, giving the best to the world around, I think that's something which you should continue to do. So focus on your karma, and karma with dharma. That's the most important thing I would say.
You want to say anything? Yeah, okay.
You inspired us.
Thank you. One is never ever be scared of making a mistake. Because too often we hold ourselves back that things may not work. The reality is the best learnings actually come from mistakes. And we've all seen that. The last one is, we keep talking about India's demographic dividend from the young, which we must nurture and must build. But we often forget in the next 12 to 15 years, we will also be the oldest country in the world. And we have zero equipped right now, not under-equipped. We are zero equipped to handle the elderly in this country. So we do need to figure out, we do need to think a little bit about this. How do you equip yourself to be a nation which cares and nurtures the elderly as well?
So folks,
can I also add another one?
Yeah. Okay.
So Sunil talked about, never be scared of making mistakes. I think what I've also seen, and which is a learning for me as well as for the younger generation today, is to also have the ability to accept your mistakes. This is something which most of these born entrepreneurs have had all the time, and that's why they've been great entrepreneurs, that whatever they do, they keep reviewing it and accept those mistakes which they've made and then keep correcting it. And once the ego comes in, and which is what in the let's say the too educated environment, sometimes we don't like to accept our mistakes because we feel, if we start accepting our mistakes, I think that's also a true test of entrepreneurship.
Thank you very much, folks. 3 extraordinary entrepreneurs, 3 extraordinary families, and 3 extraordinary role models. I would urge you to stand up and give them a standing ovation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that very fascinating and inspiring session. May I request Mr. Ram Venkatramani and Mr. Ravichandran Purushothaman to kindly come onto the stage. I request them to kindly present mementos to the dignitaries. Ladies and gentlemen, as announced earlier, we have set up 2 stalls for the sale of the book, The Making of Hero. One stall is right inside the auditorium and one is outside. Please do pick up a copy and you could get it autographed by the author, Mr. Munjal. With this, we come to the end of this session. We will now break for lunch and reassemble for the post-lunch session at 2:15. Please join us for lunch. Thank you.